Detroit Become Human is one of my favorite games of all time, not because it's a great game, but because of its missed potential with its story. If it was just given just a bit more time and care into exploring its themes and characters, Detroit would have been one of the best games of all time. Unfortunately, it never reaches those great heights because it's always dragged down by its numerous flaws. My goal here is to realize the missed potential of the three stories of our protagonist. The three main characters that we'll be following are Kara, Connor, and Markus. Their story are not equal in quality, however. They range in differing qualities quite significantly. Connor's story is the best out of all of them. His arc is about an android becoming human. Sound familiar? It remains consistent and has very few flaws in it. Markus's story is the most interesting out of the three because his explores the philosophy of a society changing. It saddens me to say that his story is just okay. It really needs time to explore its main character and support characters and also change some of its story beats up in order for it to be good. Kara's story is an objective failure at storytelling. There is no potential to realize in her story because she lacks the most important element of any good story. Kara doesn't have a character. And I know I just upset a lot of people with my claims about Kara, so let's dive into her story first.
Yes, of course. She's a wonderful little girl. I mean, I don't know many little girls, but I think she really is special.
Kara is not her own character, she is an avatar for the player. My reasoning for this is simply Kara fails at a lot of elements that are used to make a good and interesting character. What's Kara's goal throughout the story? Answer: get Alice to safety. She remains consistent in always working towards this goal. Why does Kara want to protect Alice so much? I don't know, honestly. I can't tell you why Kara formed such a fast and strong bond with this little girl. Kara and Kara barely spend any time together before Kara decides to kidnap Alice from her abusive dad.
Your fault.
Daddy, no!
It's all your fucking fault!
It's fine why Kara kidnaps Alice. No one likes to see kids get beat. But my next question is, why does Kara try to take care of Alice after they flee from Todd? Kara has no money here. She has no shelter. She doesn't even have basic rights like a human does. The best thing for Kara to do after rescuing Alice is to try to contact Alice's mom so Alice can live with a normal functioning parent. I know Alice doesn't have a mom since she's actually just an android child, but Kara thinks Alice is a human right now. Surely Kara would know that she can't possibly take care of a human child. Kara has none of the essential items needed to take care of a human kid. But let's say for argument's sake that Alice doesn't know how to contact her mom since she abandoned her. If that's the case, then why doesn't Kara drop Alice off at the police station? The police have special personnel to handle abused kids that run away from their abusive families. The authorities are equipped to deal with these types of kids and they can provide them with food and shelter. Kara doesn't do that either. It's automatically assumed by the writers that you understand Kara's motivation for taking care of Alice. Alice is a small child lost in a big scary world that constantly wants to kill her. But this is a game that champions itself for having multiple choices in its story. Why am I then, as the player, never allowed to abandon this little girl just like her mom did?
What about your mother? Will she be home soon?
And don't think I'm some heartless bastard either for saying that. I don't like Alice because she is just a walking, talking plot device. She's only there for you to save her from bad situations, or she's there to say poignant things to the audience.
Why do humans hate us? We didn't do anything wrong.
She doesn't contribute at all to Kara's arc. And speaking of Kara's arc, what is it actually? Because Kara doesn't change as a person at all throughout the story. She doesn't learn anything new about herself or overcome any challenge from her personal flaws. Maybe the game was trying to focus on Alice's arc instead, where she starts out as an abused child and you get to see her turn into a normal happy kid. But Alice doesn't display any of the qualities of a person coming from an abusive household should display. She doesn't ask questions about her abuse. She doesn't have any traumas from her abuse. She doesn't have depression, PTSD, or any of the other symptoms that abuse survivors have. David Cage, the author, doesn't understand just because you leave an abusive situation doesn't mean you're normal now. You carry those scars caused by the abuse with you. You take them with you for the rest of your life. Alice is also an android too. She has the possibility of just wiping her memory and bam, she's fine now. She doesn't remember anything. That actually could have been the big twist of Kara's story once you find out Alice is an android. The game would ask you what is better, to forget your abuse or to deal with it and learn from it. It would have been a more thought-provoking twist than what we currently have in the game. A good plot twist recontextualizes the entire story. A new light is shined on the story. You can go back now and you can see the little foreshadowing moments that are used in the story. A good example of a story twist done well is Silent Hill 2. On your first playthrough of the game, you think that the protagonist, James, is an innocent guy trying to save his wife from scary monsters. Once the twist is revealed to the audience that James has actually killed his wife, you can now look back and you'll see things differently. Those scary monsters, for example, they're just visual symbols of James's past sins. And speaking of sins, Kara's biggest sin is her caring about Alice being a human. It doesn't make sense for Kara's character to care about Alice being a human or an android because she can literally say this to Markus 5 minutes before the twist.
I don't care whether she's human or android. She's just someone who matters to me.
Nor is there any time Kara comes out before this and say that she wouldn't love Alice if she wasn't a human child. When Alice says this,
If I tell you, you won't love me anymore.
That doesn't make any sense because Kara has never given any sign that she would treat Alice different if she wasn't human. The two of them have never sat down and have a conversation about it before this twist is revealed. I think the reason for this is probably because there isn't any time for these two to talk because they're too busy running away from big scary men. I'm not exaggerating either. Every single one of Kara's chapters has a big scary man in it. Todd, Ralph, Luther, Zlatko, Carnes, a police officer, and Deus Ex soldiers. Kara's main theme is about family, but there's barely any time given to explore this theme because all of the big scary men you have to run away from interrupts that time. That's why Kara's story can't be fixed. We would have to rewrite the entire story in order to fix all the problems I just listed. Instead of doing all that work, let's replace Kara's story with another character that explores the theme of family in a better way. We're going to use Rose as our protagonist. She's a single mother of a teenage son. They just lost a father, so the family is in mourning right now. Rose currently feels sympathetic to androids and she helps fleeing deviants make it to safety. You can think of her like the Harriet Tubman and she's running her own underground railroad. Rose's son doesn't like that his mom is doing this. He's just lost one parent and doesn't want his mom taken away by the police now, causing him to lose both parents. Naturally, he'll start to resent deviants because of this threat they pose to his mom. It would be your job as Rose to parent your son into being a tolerable, empathetic person. I hope now you understand why I think Kara's story is just a train wreck. It can't be fixed or salvaged in any way. So now we're going to take a look at Connor's story and we'll see how Detroit can tell a good story.
28 stab wounds.
Connor's story is good for a number of reasons. The strongest reason being is we see his whole arc play out from beginning to end. He starts out the story as a heartless machine, seeing the world through black and white, success or failure. It's his journey of seeing gray situations in his interactions with Hank to become fully human, someone capable of feeling empathy. That's if you choose to do the good playthrough. Detroit has a morality system in it, so if you have Connor remain evil, then he doesn't change at all, resulting in his story being unsatisfying. Markus also suffers from the same morality system issues. His evil playthrough turns out unsatisfying as well from it. The cause of this problem is how Detroit treats good and evil. It's one of those games where you're punished for being evil and the game will always criticize you on your dastardly deeds. Detroit usually chastises you through heavy-handed symbolism or having a support character yell at you.
You bastard! You saw I was gonna fall and you'd rather let me die than fail your fucking mission!
Hank will always get mad at Connor for being evil, which makes it extremely hard for me to get footage of these scenes because whenever I disappoint Hank, I feel like I'm disappointing my own dad. That's no coincidence either. Connor's story explores the theme of family as well. Think of Connor as a naive child. Both Hank and Amanda are bitterly divorced parents trying to influence how their kid turns out. Hank represents your broken father. He could be rough around the edges but has a heart of gold. He's trying to push Connor into being his own person. Amanda represents your manipulative mother. She wants Connor to remain isolated from the world so she can easily control him. It's here, however, that I need to bring up that Amanda doesn't have any solid purpose for doing this. She's Connor's AI handler. She's supposed to offer guidance and strategy to help Connor in accomplishing his current mission. Yet no matter how much you try to please her, she will always act cold and demeaning towards you.
You came very close to capturing that deviant. It's a pity you let it self-destruct.
Which begs me to ask, what is Amanda's purpose in the plot? She doesn't contribute anything to Connor in his mission. Her only impactful part is in the last 5 minutes of the story. This moment comes out of nowhere and there's no build up to it. Connor is standing near Markus during the victory speech. Amanda suddenly pulls Connor back into the Zen garden and tells him,
What was planned from the very beginning? You were compromised and you became a deviant. We just had to wait for the right moment to resume control of your program.
But that doesn't make any sense. Amanda threatens to replace Connor earlier because he's not making any progress on his investigation. Amanda does everything in her power to make sure Connor remains an obedient machine. So her coming out and saying that CyberLife planned for Connor to turn deviant this whole time simply isn't true. Do you know how this twist could have been implemented better? The story should have had Connor start out already deviant. Connor already possesses free will, but CyberLife has mentally conditioned him into thinking he's still an obedient machine. Making this change would have been a great instance of gameplay informing the narrative. The reason why Connor can do all these empathetic choices in the game, like saving this fish for example, is because he possesses free will already. Why else would Connor save this fish if he's still an unthinking machine in this chapter? He shouldn't even register this fish because it's not relevant at all to the mission objective of stopping a hostage crisis. But sadly, the game misses the great opportunity of implementing this plot twist. Doing this twist would give CyberLife an active role in the story. They're the main antagonistic organization of Detroit Become Human, but they don't do anything at all in the plot. We could make it where CyberLife is experimenting with deviant androids. The company realizes that androids with independent thinking can make better choices in high-stress situations, say for example, a soldier in a war zone. CyberLife's end goal would be to replace the entire US military with their androids. Then once they accomplish that, they would go full Order 66 and overthrow the government. We could expand this goal into Markus's story too. Markus has the power to convert androids to his side like they're his brainwashed minions. Markus can insert sleeper agents into the military to spread his cult. It would add some much needed depth and complexity to Markus's revolution because currently, Markus's revolution never bothers with politics. Which is insane to think about since revolutions are 95% politics. You would think a French writer would know a thing or two about revolutions. But I'm starting to get ahead of myself here, because now we can finally start talking about Markus.
No crime against an android shall go unpunished.
Markus's story follows the classic hero's journey archetype. He starts out the game as a simple caregiver and then ends the game as a revolution leader for all of android kind. David Cage unfortunately loses our hero amongst his own journey. Mr. Cage spends most of the time in Markus's story focusing on compelling scenes or bashing you over the head with the civil rights movement, leaving our poor protagonist without any time to express himself or to grow as a character. I think that's why people consider Markus their least favorite protagonist in the game. That's a shame too, because Markus has this potential to be so much more if just given more time and care to explore his character. So that's why this section of the video is going to be structured differently. We're going to be going through Markus's entire story to realize its missed potential. Chapter 1, Shades of Color, starts off slowly with a leisurely stroll through the park to go and buy some paint supplies. It's a huge juxtaposition compared to both Connor and Kara's opening chapters. They start off with a strong hook to reel the audiences into their narrative. Markus's story lacks this bombastic hook. Instead, it takes its time to organically set up the main conflict of the world, android versus humans. You get to see the brewing tensions between the two races through small interactions. There's this homeless man with a sign, this hot dog vendor, an angry mob, a preacher who looks like a fat Martin Luther King Jr., and this shot of Markus in the back of the bus. Okay, I need to talk about the civil rights theme that Detroit has going on. It's present throughout Markus's entire story, and it's ultimately what derails the narrative from focusing on Markus. David Cage constantly compares the game's android rights movement to the civil rights movement, but it comes across as tone-deaf and vapid. My explanation for why it's presented in such a shallow fashion comes from how David Cage understands slavery and the segregation in America. He thinks that they're interchangeable events when they aren't. Segregation only happened in America as a way to directly control African Americans. We wouldn't have had segregation if we still had slavery in place. I also need to mention that David Cage uses the Holocaust in his heavy-handed symbolism. The main problem when you compare your fictional racist tragedy to a real-life tragedy, you have to do your research in order to properly respect the victims, their families, and the countries it happened to. If you do not do this, then at best, you'll come across as just uninformed, which hurts your story's credibility. At worst, you'll come across as offensive, which will piss people off. Detroit thankfully comes across as uninformed. For me at least anyway. I'm also a Caucasian as well, so I cannot speak for how someone who's African American might react to scenes like this one.
Most humans hate androids.
My people were often made to feel their lives were worthless. Some survived, but only because they found others who helped them along the way.
A way Detroit could still explore segregation and racism in its story is to actually flip the premise on its head. Make the androids the privileged class because they're the ones that are driving the economy and not humans. Doing this would be very in line with American values. Our motto here in America is profit over people. Thankfully, the next chapter, The Painter, doesn't have any heavy-handed symbolism in it. If anything, it actually might be too subtle for its own good. This chapter introduces us to Markus's father figure, Carl. Carl is a rich painter who's close to death. We see through both Carl's and Markus's interaction that Carl doesn't treat Markus like a servant. Instead, Carl treats Markus as a son. Carl encourages Markus to explore his humanity by reading about philosophy, playing music, and painting. It's through these actions that we get to see Markus's thoughts on androids. But it's only through these actions that we see Markus actually express himself. It's a problem with his character. He rarely gets a scene where he just sits down and talks about himself and what he's feeling. Compare that to Connor's story. Connor gets multiple times to express his thoughts with either Amanda or Hank. It allows us to better understand him and what he thinks about his current struggle. Markus needed a similar type of relationship with someone in his story. The game tries to do this with characters like North, but she treats Markus as a symbol first and a human second. If you want to learn more about Markus's character, you have to actively look for it. Most players aren't going to do this since they're casually playing through the game. To wrap my point up, there's a lot of interesting small moments and few big interesting scenes. The first big scene we'll see is in the next chapter. Broken keeps in line with the hero's journey archetype by being the call to action. Markus and Carl come home and discover an uninvited intruder. Markus calls the police before Carl and him go to confront the intruder. They find Leo, Carl's drug-addicted son, ransacking the place searching for money. Leo goes ballistic on his dad and starts shouting at him for failing him as a father and using Markus as a replacement son. Carl starts to show signs of a heart attack from the stress of the situation. Leo begins assaulting Markus, causing our protagonist to awaken his consciousness. You're given the choice of Markus's reaction. Do you defend yourself or do you listen to your father's plea and take the brunt of the abuse? I love this moment. It serves as a great teaching moment to the player. You're being asked what's better, to kill someone indirectly from your action or to kill someone directly from your inaction. No matter what you decide here, someone's going to die because of you. Detroit needed more of its choices to have this same amount of complexity and impact. That's a flaw that's true for every protagonist's story. They're given a vast amount of choices that don't matter at all. You could say that's fine, but the game presents these meaningless choices like they're going to have severe consequences down the line. Tying it back to Markus's choice with Leo, if you decide to push him here, he falls back and hits his head on a metal object. You see Carl crawl to his son's side and you hear his anguished cries. You just killed his son. But later, towards the end of the game, you find out Leo survived, completely robbing the beauty of this moment. The next chapter, From the Dead, is perfect. Markus wakes up in a junkyard after getting shot by the police. He needs to search for spare parts amongst discarded android corpses to repair himself enough to escape the junkyard. Why is this chapter perfect then? Well, there's a few reasons for that. 1. It's a great story scene with little to no dialogue spoken in it. It tells the story through symbolism instead. Our hero is waking up in a strange, new, hostile world. Or should I say, it's hell. He's waking up in android hell specifically. The parts Markus needs to scavenge are an eye, an audio processor, and a heart. Symbolically speaking, Markus is finally seeing, hearing, and living the suffering of his android brother and sisters. Markus himself is a Christ figure here. He is rising from the dead to bring salvation to his people. And lastly, you have this cool anime moment.
My name is Markus.
We also get to learn more about Markus as a person too. More specifically, he's sympathetic to people suffering, as we get to see here.
Thank you.
How ironic is it then that the next chapter, Jericho, doesn't explore anyone's character at all? We just follow clues, do some sick parkour, get jump scared, and drop in on the Jericho crew for the first time. Say hello to our small council for our revolution. Josh the diplomat, North the anarchist, and Simon the expendable. We'll be learning more about these guys later, just remember the rules for now. Back to the Jericho chapter, we need to change it because it's lacking right now. The first thing we need to do is cut out the Fallout 4 clues and the Prince of Persia parkour. What we'll do here instead is have Markus run into Josh on the street. The two of them will get to discussing Jericho. Markus will express his hopes of finding a utopia of people like him. Josh, being the kind optimist, wouldn't directly tell Markus that Jericho is kind of a shithole. We need to implement this change for two reasons. One, it sets up Markus' eventual disappointment when he finds Jericho, and two, it will make Josh, North, and Simon appear proactive. A big issue I have with these guys is that they aren't doing anything besides sitting in the dark all day. They can't even be bothered to find working flashlights and instead rely on lit barrel fires. It makes the Jericho crew seem lazy and incompetent, especially when you learn that these guys have been here for quite some time. How am I supposed to believe that Norv just sat here this whole time playing catch with herself in the dark, and then you want me later to take her suggestion seriously?
We sent a message without violence just like you wanted. You're reaching out to them when all they feel for us is contempt. I hope you know what you're doing.
Jericho is supposed to be our home base, but we barely see Jericho in the story at all. We only get to spend time here in the beginning of the game and the end of the game. My point being here is we should see Jericho's ongoing transformation from a small refuge into a bustling little city. It would also help show Markus' transformation from a refugee into a leader. The game never takes the time for Markus to explain where and why he wants to lead his people to freedom. He just starts to give speeches out of nowhere. You can mark this as David Cage forgetting about Markus as a character and instead just using him as a symbol. We start to see that more in the next chapter, Spare Parts. Markus and gang go to rob a warehouse for spare parts and blue blood. It's in this chapter that signifies for us that the pace is starting to pick up. Act 1 focused on establishing the conflict in our protagonists, now we get to do the exciting stuff. The scene that marks this shift in the pace is the introduction to Markus' magic power. Markus possesses the ability to convert androids to his side. How can he do this, you might be wondering? Well, it's never quite explained in game how Markus can brainwash androids or where it even comes from. According to David Cage in an interview, he explains it as Markus is emotionally shocking these androids when he converts them. If that's true then, how come none of these converted androids experience shock? None of them say, "Oh my god, I have a consciousness now," or even get mad at Markus for giving them free will. Maybe some of them were just happy being an unthinking machine. And before you think that's a ridiculous claim, remember that we have people in our society who don't view consciousness as a gift, but view it as a curse instead. Why are all the deviants instantly loyal and ready to serve Markus? It makes you think that Markus is actually enslaving these androids and using them as his minions instead of freeing them. I really wish Detroit would have gone in that direction with Markus' leadership. Sometimes it hints that Markus is turning into a mad dictator with lines like this.
They all obey me. They follow me without question. And that much power feels good. And scary at the same time.
But these are just throwaway lines. They don't actually go anywhere. How interesting would it have been to play Markus as this tyrannical dictator who enslaves people in order to gain absolute power? but the story never does anything cool with the magic hand of conversion. It can't even be bothered to introduce it properly to players either. It's during our heist mission when we get caught by a security android that we are first introduced to the magic hand of conversion. You are given the 4 options of flee, hide, attack, or grab the android. Grabbing the android is the only choice where Markus deviates him. We aren't told about this choice though in the moment. You're only shown Markus can do this to the android after you make a decision. It makes this feel like you're unfairly punished for picking a bad option since you're not given all the information of your choice up front. Detroit could have fixed this problem in a clever indirect way by shifting these 2 events around. There's a scene where Markus gets the option of converting 3 androids. This only happens after you get caught though, when it needed to happen before that. Even if you decided not to free these androids, you're at least told that Markus has the power to free androids from their servitude. The reason why I think this wasn't done originally is because we needed to have this decision on whether or not to abandon our newly acquired minion. A decision that doesn't make much sense for Markus and the gang to worry about. As I said before, deviants converted by Markus are unquestionably loyal to him. Why then are North, Josh, and Simon suggesting that our new convert is dangerous and secretly working with the humans after they just saw him deviate? They know firsthand that deviants are destroyed by humans, and they've never met a hostile deviant before this. It's way out of character for these guys to even suggest leaving one of their own behind when they're all gonna get ride or die about their revolution. That's another huge issue with the Jericho posse. They don't act consistent with their characters. In fact, I would argue they act more out of character than they do in character. Even our protagonist himself is guilty of this too. Stratford Tower is next on the list. We first see Markus sitting down outside and he sees androids around him getting abused by the system and people. He feels outraged by this, so he goes to the J Crew and tells them about his new plan. They're going to infiltrate a news station and broadcast their message of a free android race to all the humans. This is a pretty big jump in escalation that makes me feel like we just skipped a step. In the last chapter, we were worried about keeping discretion to keep Jericho safe, but now we don't even simply care anymore? No one raises an objection to Markus's radical plan either. They're all on board with it. That's out of character for them since we saw earlier that Josh and North are really cautious about things. Both of these characters should have some reservations about this plan, because if things go haywire and they're all killed, there's no one left to lead or protect Jericho. One of these 2 characters should say that Jericho needs more supplies and manpower. That way, in case the humans attack immediately after their little stunt, they can defend themselves. Because as we're about to see, the humans are ready to gun down any deviant they see. My next proposal for this chapter focuses on Simon. Simon should always die in Stratford Tower for the sake of Markus's and Connor's plot. For Markus, Simon's infected with what we call the Walking Dead disease. The symptoms of this disease are whenever you have an opportunity for a character to die in your story, but doesn't, that character gets demoted to a background character. That's what happens to poor Simon here. He ceases being a contributing character and just chills in the background with the occasional spoken line thrown here and there. I believe the game knows this too, and offers more opportunities to kill Simon off. His key role in the story is to only die. Simon's most impactful death happens in Connor's chapter. Connor finds Simon and probes his memory. This is arguably one of the key moments for Connor's investigation and deviancy. Connor finally gets a solid lead about Jericho here, and he experiences the overwhelming emotion of death after Simon blows his brains out.
Connor! Connor, you alright? Connor!
I'm okay.
Are you hurt?
I'm okay.
Jesus. Oh, you scared the shit out of me. For fuck's sake, I told you not to move! Why do you never do what I say?
I was connected to its memory. When it fired, I felt it die. Like I was dying. I was scared. I saw something in its memory.
Connor needs this moment to happen in his story because he never engages in investigating any of Markus's activities before or after Stratford Tower. Even though Connor's whole objective is to stop the deviants, He's nowhere to be seen when hundreds of them are marching down the streets in Freedom March. But before I talk about that chapter, we need to discuss Capitol Park first. This chapter opens up with North and Josh arguing amongst each other on whose ideology is better suited for the revolution. Josh is committed for peaceful dialogue, while North is insistent on violence. Pacifism versus aggression. Paragon versus renegade. Good versus evil. That's what this boils down to, because both sides are one-dimensional in their argument. Josh and North never really try to convince you about their philosophy. They just insist that they're right and you should listen to them. And before you think I'm forgetting about these moments with North, I need to clarify that North is just always encouraging you instead of actually persuading you to commit violence.
All the media are talking about what we did last night. The humans are terrified. They're afraid of a civil war. Many of our people were burned in response to what happened. The humans hate us. They'll never give us our freedom.
Think of North like the Joker. Any chance she gets to cause death and destruction, she'll gladly take with a scary amount of pleasure. Josh, on the other hand, he'll just nag at you like your overbearing mother. Detroit misses the great opportunity of using these two characters as your keys of power. North would have represented your military, while Josh would have represented your diplomacy. It would be up to you, the player, to keep your keys happy with you, because if you neglect them, they're going to leave you and form their own revolution group that follows their ideology more closely. Whoever you do choose, you would feel their influence more in the revolution as well. For example, if you support Josh's peaceful ways, you'd find Jericho filled with computers and medical supplies. And the same is true vice versa. If instead you support North, Jericho will have more weapons and explosives the next time you see it. Whoever you support will be your chosen buddy in the Capitol Park chapter. Because as of right now, it's always North with you here breaking into the CyberLife stores. The only justification the story can muster as why North needs to be here is to set up for the forced romance between her and Markus. And we are first given the chance to lock into this romance at the beginning of Freedom March. This chapter starts off with Markus alone reflecting on his actions. Eventually North comes by and the two of you can discuss about the past and you can share your first kiss. Or if you're a Chad instead, you can just leave this hobot out in the cold.
Where are you going?
To talk to the humans.
The romance between Markus and North only makes sense if you're doing an evil playthrough. North should only want to be with a Markus that agrees with her violent ways. How come then, if Markus completely just disregards North at every chance he gets and sticks with his peaceful ways, she'll still develop feelings for him? This doesn't make any sense for her character. She thinks of pacifism as a weakness. She should be completely turned off by Markus's commitment to peace. She's fully entrenched in her ideals and she cannot be swayed. Detroit could salvage this by giving players the opportunity to change North's mind and help her grow as a character. But regrettably, you never get this chance to call out North for her beliefs. Take this scene for example. Markus last night killed 2 police officers, resulting in people starting to destroy their androids out of fear. Markus expresses regret about these actions to North, yet she won't even be bothered to consider that violence only begets more violence. She'll just double down on her stances. The rest of Freedom March has Markus leading a march for android rights, obviously. Markus's magic power gets an upgrade here. He can now convert androids by simply looking at them. As you probably guessed, there isn't an explanation for this either. All the game needed to do was explain how Markus in a lore document acquired this power. We could put this lore document at Kamsky's house. Also, another question. Where is Connor in this chapter? There are literally hundreds of deviants out here on a public street facing off with the police. Why isn't a deviant hunter here to hunt these deviants? Detroit, why do you miss all these chances for our 2 protagonists to interact with each other? Especially when Connor and Markus are set up to have this big confrontation in the climax. That transitions me into part 1 of the climax, Crossroads.
You're Connor, aren't you? That famous deviant hunter. Well, congratulations. You seem to have found what you were looking for.
In this chapter, Connor is infiltrating Jericho to capture Markus. And then finally, our 2 protagonists meet. And it's so underwhelming too, because the story never takes the time to establish a relationship between these two. What we need was more scenes of Connor investigating Markus. We could have started this after the spare parts chapter happens. Connor could report to Hank that there was a break-in at a CyberLife production plant. We could then insert Connor at the end of Capitol Park when Markus is deciding whether or not to execute these police officers. Connor would hear reports about deviant activity in the area and he'll rush to the scene. Connor will arrive too late to stop Markus from choosing whatever he does. Connor would then try to give chase to Markus, but he'll get stopped by reinforcing cops that are arriving on scene and they'll start to shoot at Connor. We'd leave the reason as to why the cops shoot at Connor intentionally vague for players to make up. Freedom March would happen as usual with one difference. Connor and Hank would be here too. The march will eventually get broken up and Markus will try to run away. This would cause Connor to run after him. The two of them would finally meet face to face and you as Markus would get to decide about how you feel about Connor as the deviant hunter. Markus could either show sympathy about Connor's situation since he just views Connor as a slave, or Markus could view Connor with disdain since an android hunting another android is just blasphemy. Our end goal here is to have our two protagonists at least know each other before they meet, because when Markus says,
You're Connor, aren't you? That famous deviant hunter.
that isn't true at all. We are never shown the first time Markus learns about Connor. Having a growing relationship between these two would add more weight to the scene at the church in the ending. Which brings me to the final big choice of the game. Do you lead an armed revolution to free your captured brothers and sisters from a concentration camp? Or do you lead a peaceful demonstration in front of the concentration camps? Let's discuss the revolution route first. I'll tell you why I like this path for two reasons. One, it's a more satisfying path for narrative and gameplay. You're taking action against evil by fighting for your freedom. That's represented in the amount of gameplay you're given, like leading your troops. My only gripe with this path is how the general public doesn't support this. That seems odd to me since I, as an American, would view it favorably about androids fighting for their freedom and sticking it to the man. The peaceful demonstration route is the weaker option for multiple reasons. Mostly it has to do with the androids just sitting around not doing anything. They just wait here until the army attacks. They need to be doing something, anything here. So here's what I propose. Markus should invite one of these reporters that we see off to the sidelines for a debate. Markus would argue about why androids deserve rights, and the reporter would argue against it. During all of Detroit's runtime, it will never tell you about why androids deserve rights. It'll just show you them being abused. But that's not a good enough reason since how can you abuse an unthinking, unfeeling object? So here are my three main arguments against android rights. 1. Android will cause massive human unemployment. Androids are superior workers since they don't need food, sleep, and health insurance. 2. Androids can out-reproduce humans. Androids can play the long game and outnumber humans through numbers. And 3. Androids are dangerous. They are stronger, don't age, and they can learn anything. Who's to say that if androids gain the upper hand in the future, they wouldn't genocide humans in revenge? Your job as Markus would be to counter each one of these points in a graceful manner to win over public opinion. If you succeed, then the president orders the military to stand down. If you fail, then the army will resume its slaughter of all the deviants. And then if you do fail, the only way your revolution could survive is to use the nuke. Right before Connor and Markus meet for the first time, North will tell Markus about a dirty bomb that one of the androids armed. She'll give you the option of accepting the detonator or refusing it. If you hold on to it, then you can use it as your end-all option. If you refuse it, then it's gone for good from the story. I believe that's a mistake. The nuclear option should always happen if you fuck up the climax. Either you, North, or another android if she's dead will trigger the nuke in order to save all the deviants. It would greatly impact the player if they got this ending. You could have prevented this tragedy from happening if you have made better choices. Just like how Detroit Become Human could have prevented this tragedy of missing its own potential. Markus' story needed more screen time to flesh out all of its characters, and it needed to add some depth to its revolution plot. Connor's story just needed to add one extra plot twist and it would have made the story amazing. Kara's story can't be fixed. Kara isn't a character and Alice is just a plot device. And that concludes the video. Hello, I'm the android sent by Cyberlife. Special thank you to my boy Fredo's Bow bitch. If it wasn't for you, I would not have this amazing thumbnail, and you also helped me keep some of my sanity while making this video. Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. If you liked it, please leave a like, share your thoughts with me, and also subscribe if you would like to see more. So, thank you again, everybody, and I hope to see you on the next one.